Politicians in the United Kingdom, including the Prime Minister, have voted not to launch an inquiry into grooming rape gangs and the scandal around them. They're just not interested, I guess. Well, what is the scandal? The scandal is that recent data shows that foreign nationals are more than 3 times as likely to be arrested for sexual offenses as British citizens. The government published this data, which is not new to them. What's new is that they have admitted it. 364 British MPs voted against this. They feel like they don't need more information like this. Well, Vicky Richter is a journalist. She's been covering this story and she joins us to explain. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So can you explain a little bit of this scandal and what Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch says is a cover-up by the government? Why is this happening? Why don't politicians want an inquiry into grooming rape gangs?
So you have to understand this grooming gang scandal goes since minimum over 40 years. So there are police records which go back 40 years talking about this mostly Pakistani grooming gangs who rape white girls out of the working class in Britain. And for sure, doesn't look really good for the multicultural mass immigration policies what Britain and mostly the Labour, but also the Tories in those 40 years wanted to advertise and say, yeah, we need mass immigration. So this doesn't really fit the narrative. And they say because of racial problems like that people in the UK would start rioting, they can't really go after those crimes against those children. So it's a very critical situation right now, because when you also look into the reports and the reports from the whistleblowers, they are also saying it's not only the Pakistani raping and grooming gangs who are involved. No, it's also a cover up by the media. It's a cover up by the police, by local and national police, and on politicians in a local and federal way. So it's a huge cover up. And if the government would look into these cases closer in a national scale, there will be a lot of people show up which who would be happy that there is no inquiry, there is no investigation. So that's a reason why people...
Well, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, says that we actually don't need any more inquiries. We already have been doing inquiries. But the data is not new to the government. It's new that they've admitted it to the British people. So what inquiries is he talking about? Have they been ongoing and the government has just done nothing about it? Their sort of way of dealing with this is to let sleeping dogs lie, or rather let raping dogs lie?
So there are inquiries and there are investigations, but this inquiry, what he was talking about, was not naming especially those Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs. So it's talking about investigations into child exploitation and child abuses and crimes against children, but it's not directly focused on the industrial scale of this problem and the scandal with those grooming gangs, which are mostly happening in the Islamic community. It's not only Pakistani, so that's what people have to think about too. It's not only the Pakistani community, there are also other communities out of the Muslim faith who committing those crimes in those raping gangs and grooming gangs, but the bigger number is Pakistani. And for sure, we heard a lot about the Labour Party didn't want to really go after those because they are don't want to lose the vote from the from these communities. They count on those votes.
Right. Well, a lot of the data shows that whether it's individual people or groups of people or organized gangs, it's not just Pakistani, there are also Albanian, Afghani, Iraqi perpetrators. So we have to come up with a way to have this conversation without impugning everyone. We're not saying everyone who's Afghani is a rapist, clearly, but there has to be a way to do this, to have this conversation in a way that doesn't seem racist or hateful, but just admits the truth. Are politicians just too stupid to do this? Or is that your take? Or maybe I'm off base.
I don't think they are too stupid. I think they are afraid and they to have their names coming up in those cover-ups, because you have to think there is not a lot of Muslims who are actually speaking up against it and say, yes, this is a problem what we have right now in our communities. And they still have the this framing of Islamophobia in Britain, where people get silenced with, "Oh, you are just you have just Islamophobia." So people have to go, the politicians have to start talking about this problem, because it's not that those gangs. I had an interview with Raja Mia. He was the whistleblower from Oldham, and he is Muslim, and he said that it's not a case of pedophilia in those most cases. It's a question of faith, because they see white girls in a lower ranking, so they see that they can misuse the sayings from the Quran to commit those crimes and say, yeah, that's okay, but it's not. And people or politicians in the UK are afraid to make a stand and talk about that. And this is what we have to start is, we're not saying that every Muslim is a bad person or commits those crimes, but we have a statistic which says in this minority, the majority of men between 25 and 40 or 50 are committing or involved in those crimes. So there is a problem in the community, and we should be able to talk about that in a free country, which is Britain, or which pretend Britain is, where we have freedom of speech, or we have so-called freedom of speech, so we are allowed to talk about it. But UK doesn't like that. The government doesn't like it, so it kills the messenger. It says, oh, everyone who is speaking about it, who is exposing it or is questioning, they put the framing Islamophobic, far right, be quiet, because you are a racist.
Right. The conversation is also framed as anti-immigrant rhetoric as well. Like, oh, you just don't like immigrants, when really it's what people don't like is just being raped.
Yeah.
That's kind of, baseline.
Yeah,
so you've spoken to these victims before. Can you tell me how they feel about this inquiry or lack thereof? How do they feel about this government vote?
They are disappointed and angry, because they had to fight so long for their justice that they even had been taken for serious. Because you have to think about what they heard when they started speaking up, when they're reporting it. There were policemen telling them, don't say anything, or when the parent said something, no, your child is just misbehaving. Or then there were a case of two fathers who tried to save or rescue their two daughters from a rape in those in a gang rape, and who got arrested was the two fathers who trying to rescue their children, their two daughters, and the daughters had to stay at the house where they got been raped. So you have to think about, this is all still working in the survivors and in the family who is connected to the survivors. And then they have the politicians who have a chance to finally speak up, to finally give them justice, and then they're gonna vote against it. And this is what I think is the most important issue in this whole debate, that the politicians make it politic. Saving children from rape and from grooming is not a political issue. It's a issue, an ethical issue, and a spiritual issue too. Because we as adults, it's our duty to save the children, and we should have the right to say no. Even it's not important what you believe in. Child rape should always be a bad thing.
Yes, that's the easiest
is
thing
what
to agree on. We should all be against
and I
rape
think
of children.
this is what I'm very disappointed with most of the politicians right now, is that they make a politic thing out of it. Like, oh, we are the first ones who want to talk about it. We're gonna change it. No, you had over 40 years to change it. You all really failed the survivors. Now you have to change to do something about it, and then they voted against it. And this shows me that they are afraid of a cover-up, or that the cover-up comes out.
Well, there are 111 politicians that voted for this inquiry, so there's a silver lining if you're looking to any politicians to have some faith in.
Yeah.
I guess, I want to ask you also, given that this is a relatively new scandal to Americans, we have not been living with this in the same way. It was known to the British people. But is this organized? Are these gangs organized in the same way that, say, the Mexican cartels are, or the South American gangs in the United States? They don't have a lot of voting power per se, but they have a lot of power when it comes to money, influence, drugs, that kind of thing. So is it organized, or are these just one-off individuals that politicians are afraid of?
Yeah. So it's an industrial problem. So those raping gangs work in an industrial scale. So they have a lot of connections in the communities. They groom the children from the age 11, starting raping then with 12, 13, going up. So, and they do it through their shisha shops or through taxis. And you have to think, in Rotherham, there were 1,400 victims only in this little city. So you have to think about the scale. How many people have to be involved to cover that up, to put it under the rug? So those people, the grooming gangs, have connections to parties. In Oldham, they have very good connections to the Labour Party, which is now in office in the government, who is the prime minister from the Labour Party. So you have to think and I like your that you compared with the mafias and the cartels in the US with child sex trafficking, because it's the same kind of construction of the industrial scale, because you have to have connections, you have to have the chance to be able to make people silent, to not talk about it. So they have connections to the police, they have connections to the social workers, because in some of the cases, the social workers were interviewing the victims who were raped and impregnated from their predator, and the predator was allowed to listen.
Oh my God!
Because the social worker said, yeah, okay. So those are kinds. Or then you have cases where the children, or the child who got raped, got taken away from their parents and put into foster care. So that's insane. So this scandal is really wrecking the whole social system of the UK, and America should listen very, very close, because this is happening if you follow too much the socialistic ideologies, what sadly our Europe and the UK did, because they put more and more socialistic and Labour Party closed politicians into offices. And we have to stop that. And like I said, it's not a political issue. It's an issue about helping children. And when a child can't be safe only because it's a working class white girl in a city like Luton, then there's something really, really wrong in the country.
So I see the picture you're painting here. It's not just one-off rapists. These are organized gangs, because what you're saying is it would be easy to break this up if we had a well-intentioned government, but too many people are either involved or paid to look the other way, or looking the other way for some other type of threat or influence. And yes, I understand we have that in the United States too. And somehow, when you put liberals in charge, rapists and child traffickers have free reign. So there have to be people who were involved allowing this or involved in any way. So that's the inquiry that we're not going to get in the United Kingdom. That's what you're saying.
No, but to have a little silver lining, what you said before, in the discussion about this inquiry, the government started using the words what the people, the whistleblowers and the survivors were using, like Islamic grooming gangs, Pakistani people. So they are starting talking about it in a political discussion through the MPs are talking in the room in Westminster. So this is a little win.
Right. But it feels Pyrrhic in a way. Yes.
And it's a shame. And everyone who voted against it, I don't know how they look into the mirror this morning when they woke up. I really can't answer that question. And I'm a mother of a daughter.
Yes, me too. I have 2 daughters. Okay, well, thank you for your context. Vicky Richter has been on this story, so please follow her on X. It's Vicky Richter USA. This was your first time on Redacted, but hopefully not your last. Thank you so much, and come back anytime.
Thank you for having me.